An American prince and a fashion icon. Their whirlwind romance captivated a nation, only to end in an unimaginable tragedy. You've seen the headlines and the iconic photographs. Now, Ryan Murphy and FX are giving us love story John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. A glossy, high-drama retelling of their life together. The series paints a picture of undeniable chemistry and a private love story forced into the harsh glare of a national obsession. It's a compelling story, full of stolen glances, heated arguments, and the crushing weight of that dynastic name. And like most historical dramas, it cleverly blends real events with invented scenes, tweaking timelines and dialogue to make the story pop. This is the fairy tale Ryan Murphy is selling. A commoner enters the palace, a classic tale of love against the odds. But the true story of JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette was defined by intense pressure, private turmoil, and a tragic struggle against a mythic legacy. Their real story is far more complex, more human, and arguably more heartbreaking than any script could ever capture. So today, let's separate the Hollywood fantasy from the historical record on some of the series' most talked about moments. The series gives us a classic meet-cute. John and Carolyn are introduced by Calvin Klein himself at a glamorous NYC charity gala. He's instantly smitten, but she plays it cool, refusing to give him her number and telling him to try reception at her work. The show then has John pursuing her, showing up at the Calvin Klein showroom to buy suits just to win her over. It's a great romantic setup, but it gets the story completely backward. Their real first meeting happened sometime between 1991 and 1992, and it was far more direct. Carolyn, working as a publicist or personal shopper at Calvin Klein, was helping John pick out suits. She gave him her number, and he called her right away. There was no grand chase after a gala snub. The show flips the events to create more romantic tension, making John work a little harder for her affection. What the series does get right is just how complicated their early relationship was. It wasn't a straight line to the altar. They dated on and off between 1992 and 1994, a time when John was still very publicly involved with actress Daryl Hannah. It wasn't until after the profound tragedy of his mother's death that the relationship finally and truly began. Episode 3 shows the death of Jackie Kennedy Onassis in May 1994 as a major turning point for John and Carolyn. The show uses this moment to strip away John's emotional walls, showing him seeking comfort in Carolyn and essentially choosing her from that point forward. This is largely true. While they were already in each other's lives, Jackie's death from non-Hodgkin's lymphoma marked a definitive shift. It effectively ended the long overlap with Daryl Hannah and was the moment John and Carolyn fully committed to one another. One crucial detail to clarify, however, is that Jackie Kennedy never actually met Carolyn Bessette. The show implies a sort of passing of the torch, but in reality, their lives never intersected. The series uses Jackie's passing as a powerful dramatic device to accelerate their on-screen intimacy. While John's grief was absolutely real, any scenes showing him making a raw, vulnerable confession to a journalist are almost certainly fictionalized for effect. One of the most infamous moments in their public life is the fight in the park, and the show doesn't shy away from it. Episode 5 shows them in a massive public argument, screaming about wedding pressures, the paparazzi, and drama with John's magazine, George. The scene ends with John trying to wrench her engagement ring off her finger before they collapse into a tearful hug. Believe it or not, this absolutely happened. In February 1996, photographers captured the entire explosive argument in Washington Square Park. The shouting, the grabbing, John sitting with his head in his hands, and his attempt to remove her ring. It was all caught on camera and splashed across the tabloids. Where the show takes liberties is with the cause of the fight. The series ties it to the launch of George magazine, but biographical accounts suggest it stemmed from something more specific. Carolyn was reportedly furious after a wedding they'd attended, feeling the bride had used John's presence as incentive for press coverage in the New York Times, and she was angry he didn't leave with her. This happened months after the magazine's launch in September 1995, so the show compresses the timeline for a cleaner narrative. The specific insults are pure dramatic invention. In reality, John later went on Howard Stern's show, dismissed it as a silly argument, and the couple married just 7 months later. The series depicts a beautifully romantic proposal on a boat off Martha's Vineyard, where John gives Carolyn a simple swimming ring that belonged to his mother and tells her, "Everything's better with a partner." This scene is a perfect example of how the show mixes fact with a little bit of fiction. The proposal really did happen on a fishing boat off Martha's Vineyard over the 4th of July weekend in 1995. The line, "Everything's better with a partner," is also believed to be what he said. The detail about Jackie's swimming ring is less confirmed, but it's a touching story rooted in truth. But the most interesting fact the show includes is Carolyn's hesitation. She didn't say yes right away. In real life, she waited 3 weeks before accepting, reportedly terrified by the idea of marrying into the nonstop fame of the Kennedy family. That fear of the spotlight directly shaped their wedding. The show dramatizes their famously private ceremony, and the real event was a masterclass in secrecy. They married on September 21st, 1996, on the remote Cumberland Island in Georgia, with only about 40 guests. There was no press, not a single leak. Carolyn wore a stunningly simple, now iconic dress by Narciso Rodriguez, and the images that emerged later only added to the couple's mystique. Of course, the series builds toward the couple's tragic end. It explores their marital struggles under relentless media scrutiny and touches upon the idea of the Kennedy curse. And that pressure was very, very real. Carolyn, especially, was hounded by the paparazzi. She went from being a successful, independent fashion executive to a public figure overnight. The media was often cruel, painting her as icy or shallow, when friends knew her as witty, warm, and fiercely intelligent. Beller's biography, the show's source material, heavily focuses on this gap between the private person and the public caricature, and confirms the immense strain it put on their marriage. Their final flight on July 16, 1999, is a national tragedy. John, Carolyn, and her sister Lauren were flying on a plane piloted by John to his cousin Rory Kennedy's wedding. But the crash wasn't because of some mystical curse. It was a heartbreaking combination of factors. The official NTSB report concluded the probable cause was the pilot's failure to maintain control of the airplane during a descent over water at night, likely the result of spatial disorientation. Any scenes in the show depicting their final conversations or the specific moments before the flight are, by necessity, pure speculation. So, how accurate is FX's love story? Much like Ryan Murphy's other series, Feud, Capote vs. the Swans, it uses a factual skeleton to tell an emotionally resonant story. It is not a documentary. The show captures the essence of their struggle, a deep love for one another constantly at war with the crushing weight of public life. It changes timelines, invents dialogue, and combines events to serve that drama. But the real story is even more compelling. It's a story about Carolyn Bessette, a woman who was so much more than a style icon, a driven, intelligent professional whose true personality was flattened by a tabloid caricature. And it's a story about John F. Kennedy Jr., a man who spent his life trying to honor an impossible legacy while carving out a path of his own. The fiction is entertaining, but the reality is a poignant human tragedy about love, loss, and the brutal cost of a name. But that leads me to a final question for you. Does Hollywood have a duty to be 100% accurate with real-life tragedies? Or is dramatic license acceptable if it helps tell a good story? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for watching!